Now that we've taken a quick peek at the chain save code for WebGL, and we've also taken a quick look at ABIs, we'll jump into the code here and hopefully things will become a little more clear as we actually do it. The first thing I'm going to do is just create an empty game object and give it any name that we think is appropriate for it, and create a new script. And I'll just call this send ERC20 Token and choose new script, create an add. Go ahead and edit the script and open it up. And I'm using Rider here, but you could be using Visual Studio or any other kind of IDE you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to do this all in my start function, which is not the best way to do it necessarily, but it's the quickest way to do it just here for the sake of an example. And why don't we go back over and copy out the code to begin from the ChainSafe Gaming SDK documentation, and that will really help us just speed up the process here to getting things done. Let's see here, we can just click copy. Go ahead and post this all in the start function. And let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, why don't we knock off the things we don't necessarily need? And that's going to be, we don't need to set a gas price or a gas limit for this. These will be taken care of automatically. So that's great. The next thing is we don't need to have a value, where the value is always going to be 0. And what this is this is the value that we pay to run the function, the contract function. And sending ERC20 tokens is never, well, not normally, a payable function. So that means we don't need to pay anything to the contract itself to send those tokens. And in fact, if we put any value in here, it's going to actually cause some problems. So we can go ahead and remove these gas limit and price. They're not required. If we hover our mouse over here, okay, so it's throwing exceptions here. Why don't we import the necessary things? So we need to import the type system exceptions. We'll add this to the top. And it's also throwing, this is, an await function, so this is async. In order to do async, we actually have to have this async void start. If you're not super familiar with async programming, that doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that we just have to add async at the beginning to allow this await function to occur, and then our errors will go away. Okay, going back to this send contract, we can hover our mouse over here, and it says all the things that are required. So method, ABI, contract, args, value, and then we can see the gas limit and price limit is optional. So for the value, we always want the value to be 0. So I'm just going to hard code it in here by saying 0 so that I don't make any mistakes. And I'm just going to remove the value from here. Okay, the next thing is when we're transferring tokens, what do we need? Let me think here for a second. So we need 2 values as arguments. We need to pass in 2 things. So the 2 things that we need to pass in are, 1, we need to pass in the address that we want to send the tokens to, and 2, we need to pass in how many of those tokens we want to send. So we can go ahead and type that out, and there's a little bit of a way to do it here. So why don't we do it right here? We can go ahead and remove these arguments. And we need to do this in a JSON format, so we can use some helpers here. So let's make a string array. So we'll say string array, and we'll just call this object equals, and then we're going to pass in 2 here. So the first thing is going to be the address of where we want to send it. And, oops, let's say address. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. address, and then the total value that we want to send. And that should be good. So we'll make these variables after. Then we want to change this into a JSON format. And so we can just say JSON converter. Yes, this is good. Then we want to serialize these objects. An object, because we're just taking this here and passing it in. And just like this, we should call this args. And now this is happy. So we've passed in the values that we need. Okay. So I seem to be working backwards here, and we'll just keep working with this for the moment. Okay, why don't we add an address and a total value for now? So we can say a string address equals to, and we'll add that. And we also want, say, an int of, say, value to send. And we'll work with that a little bit before we create the total value. But the total value will actually be a string. We can only send strings. And yeah, okay, it's saying it may not be initialized, so we'll just set it as empty for the moment, like this, just to make the error go away. Okay, value, arguments, contract. Okay, so there's a contract here already. The contract address that we need specifically is for this ERC20 token that we want to send. And in this case, it's CKB on L2. So we need some way to look this up. And thankfully, for the ease of our case, this is just included in the documentation for Godwoken. So why don't we go over to the Godwoken documentation? I'll leave a link for this, but it's docs.godwoken.io. We go to basic concepts, and to go to Godwoken public networks, we're going to scroll all the way down. And we see here we have L2 Godwoken testnet pCKB contract, and it gives us the address specifically. So we can just copy and paste this out, and then go ahead and add it here. This is the specific contract address of where it lives on the Godwoken blockchain. Then the next thing is we need these ABIs, as we had talked about before. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the existing ABI, and I'll leave it empty for the moment like this. And we'll make sure we have no errors and just save this. And again, we need to go over and copy this ABI. And I think I have it open in a window here. There we go. And again, I'll leave a link for this. But here's this ABI. We're going to double click, copy this out, and then go back to Unity. So now this is where this ABI editor tool that comes into place. And let's look at the format of the ABI. So it says input ABI, enter ABI here. So we'll remove this and copy and paste this in. And when we look at this, we can see, and maybe it's a little hard to see, it's got a lot of quotation marks here. So as we know, when we're coding in Unity or in C#, the quotation marks mark the end or the beginning and the end of a string. So when Unity reads this, so I'll just say copy and paste this directly into my code, like into the ABI here, it doesn't really know where the string starts and ends because it thinks it starts here, ends here, starts here, ends here, and so on and so forth. So it really can't read this. And what we need to do is just add a slash here at the beginning to tell it that this is not the beginning or the ending of the string. So it's basically just a special way to format things with lots of these commas. Okay, so we're going to go back to this ABI editor, convert the data, and it's just going to add all of these slashes in here for us so we can copy and paste this. We're going to go back here and we can just go between and paste. And you can see here now that it accepts this ABI without any problems. So that's cool. So we have the contract, we have the ABI, we'll add who we're going to send it to and how much we want to send. So let's say int value to send. So I don't know, let's just say we're going to send 15. We'll deal with that in a minute. And lastly, we need a method. So when you're sending ERC20 tokens, actually the method is always the same. So that really helps us to remember what we're doing. And the method is always called transfer. So there we go, transfer. Address. Yeah, let's just pick a random address. I have one here, so you could make 2 accounts to have an address. I can give you this one you can use, and that's actually a contract. That's not the address we want. So let me get my address, or one of my addresses, and give it to you there. Hold on a minute. Okay, let's remove this. And I should even rename this. I'm going to say send to address, just so I don't confuse myself about what this is. And I will copy and paste this. This is my address that I created in an earlier tutorial video. So it's an ERC20, or sorry, it's a Ethereum address here. So it should be exactly 40 long, and it will start with like 0x, so we know that's the correct one. But as you can see, the send to address looks very similar here to this contract address, so it's easy to get them mixed up. But this is an address on the blockchain, and then this is the address of where I'm sending. But really, just by looking at them, there's really no difference or way to tell here. So again, try not to confuse those together, but this is the person I'm sending it to. This is the address of the ERC20. Now, we do need to do a little more here before we send it. We're so close. We just have one last thing to do here. And that is adjust this value to send. So if we just put 15 in here as the value, and it has to be a string, so this is an int, and we could just say value to send, copy and paste in here, and then just say toString. This is going to be like a really tiny number because the ERC20 tokens have 18 decimal places. So it would look something like 0.0, and my math is probably wrong here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, so in like this. And this is how much CKB we would be sending, right? So it has 18 decimal places behind it, or in front of it in this case, and it would just be a crazy small amount. So we're just going to do a little math on this in order to make it whole CKBs that we're sending. And how I'm going to do this is first I'm going to use something called a big integer. And it's going to be using the system's numerics namespace. And so it will automatically add it up here for me. Your editor probably will do the same. And so a big integer can hold a longer number than a regular integer because a regular integer may not be big enough to hold the number you need to deal with. And I'm going to call this my total value big int. And I know my variable names here are not great. But what we want to do is take this value to send, and then we are going to times it by, and let's say math, and this is a special function that comes with C#, math.power, and we're going to take 10 to the power of 18. So this means this is going to give us 18 zeros behind something. It's going to throw in an error because this actually is generating a double, and you can see cannot convert type double to system numerics big int. So we need to actually cast this to a big integer, and it's pretty simple to do. We just need to type it in here basically. So we just go in there and type big integer, and now we'll stop complaining. So we'll take this number, cast it into a big integer, times it by this int, and give us this value total. Now we can actually just take this number, which is going to be 15 times to the power of 10, or sorry, 15 times 10 to the power of 18, and put it in here and just say toString. And now this is going to pass the correct value of 15 CKB in. I believe this should be, knock on wood, everything we need if we didn't make any mistakes here. And let's give it a try here. So I'll save this, and we'll need to go back to Unity. And it might take a second to compile, and that's fine. You can go ahead and close this. We'll ignore whatever errors we have. Now to get this working, we need to make sure that we have something set up here in Unity, which is we want to go to Web3 Unity. This is the ChainSafe SDK that we should have installed. And in it we have, let's see here, scenes. Okay, in scenes we have web login and wallet login. So wallet login is the PC, and I believe it maybe also works on mobile, but we're going to be using the web login, which is WebGL. So we need to go to build settings, make sure you have it changed to WebGL. You have to click switch platform, and this may take a couple of minutes to switch over. The next thing you need is you need to make sure that you have the web login scene first. This should be the very first scene. The next scene should be the scene that you just worked on. So go ahead and create it, save it, and I'll call this sample scene for ERC20. You can call it whatever you want. But we need to make sure that we have this added in as the second scene like this. You can just drag and drop in, so like this. I'm going to close this, and I'll just go build and run. Now this is going to take a couple of minutes to compile. I think on my computer it takes about 4 or 5 minutes. It might even take a few more minutes than that. But once that happens, it will pop up, and we'll just jump forward to that moment now. Once the build is complete, a localhost will pop up like this on your primary browser. For me, localhost doesn't work as long as I have a VPN connected, so I have to make sure that I turn off my VPN first and then reload this page. Once that's done, I can go ahead and refresh. And you should see the Unity WebGL player pop up like this. Now before I click login, I'm going to go ahead and open up my MetaMask and make sure I'm connected to the right network that I want to use. So you may be connected to Ethereum mainnet or some other testnet networks, but we're going to make sure we're connected to the Godwoken testnet v1 because that's the one we want to use. Then go ahead and click login. Once again, your MetaMask should pop up and it says, do you want to use this account here? And I'm going to say next, sure, connect. Go ahead. Now it automatically loads the second scene where our script is, and it's once again called up MetaMask for this transfer. And as you can see, it's asking us to send 15 pCKB. So P here just stands for Polyjuice, which is the provider here for Godwoken. But this just means we're sending 15 CKB to this account that we have already set up. And actually, I think I'm just sending it from my account to myself, which is probably not the best idea, but oh well, here we go. And it's telling us the gas fee to send it will be 3.6 CKB on the testnet, and it will give us the estimated total price. So we can go ahead and click confirm, and now it started the process. If we open up MetaMask again and we check under activity, you can see that it's in the process of sending this CKB, and it will take a moment to do so. And we got a little pop-up here that says transaction confirmed, view on Etherscan. Well, Etherscan is just for Ethereum. We're not using Ethereum. We're actually on Godwoken network, but you can see that it's been sent here. And we can actually check this on the Godwoken network by going back to the documentation, and we can choose one of the L2 Godwoken testnet explorers. And I'm going to use Block Scout. I like this one better, but we have two options. And here is the testnet. And what we can do, actually, I can even just see mine right here as 15 pCKB. We know what we sent. But we can also go and get the transaction information here by clicking on this and copying the transaction ID and adding it here, searching it, clicking on it. And so this just keeps a record of all the transactions that happened on the blockchain, on Godwoken specifically. And we can see exactly where it went from and to who. You can see it sent from myself to myself here. And what did we send? We sent 15 CKB. And then it says what it actually cost to send it. So in the end, it estimated it might be around like 3.5 CKB, but it only actually cost 2.4. So that is, in USD currently $0.008, so very, very little to actually send this transaction on Godwoken. But here's all the information. It even has the the contract of what the contract came from, and this is the transaction hash. So if we ever wanted to share it with someone else, we could just copy this and share it with them, and they could check this out. So that's how to send an ERC20 token using Unity. Because we used a custom function here, we could essentially use this to send any kind of function or any kind of method. So if we wanted to use a different contract and use a different method or function, we know how to add in the variables here to it as well, or the arguments, and the whole process is just going to be the same. I have one last tip here for you. If you are sending something with no arguments, right? So sometimes you have functions with 0 arguments. You do need to have something in your arguments, and you can just do it like this if it's empty, just so it doesn't throw an error. You need to make sure you have these open and closing square parentheses here so that it doesn't throw an error, and this just means empty arguments. So again, if you are interacting with a function that requires a payment, so not transfer, you can go ahead and put the value in here to do that, but many functions are just free and it only costs you gas, and that's calculated automatically. So again, congratulations for sending your first function here, or calling your first custom function that's payable, or not payable, changes the state on the blockchain. And in the next lesson, we're going to learn how to take this just one step farther so that users can enter in their own value to send and their own address. And it does require a little format checking to make sure they didn't put in some bad values here, which will throw an error when we try and send the contract. So let's look at that in our next tutorial coming up.